And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, today's sea ice analysis showing a pretty good open area here now north of the Bering Strait in the southern Chukchi Sea. Another area here off the western Arctic coast, and then some ice right in close to the coastline here from Cape Lisburne on down around Point Hope, Kivalina, and in toward Kotzebue. And from there, looking at the tonight's forecast front coming across the Bering Strait and into the Chukchi Sea, pushing some rain and increasing the winds into St. Lawrence Island, western Seward Peninsula, and up along the western Arctic coast, western and the northwest coast here. Fair inland, drier with some clearing, and also showers and isolated thunderstorms over the eastern interior, slowly diminishing, but some showers lingering through the evening hours. An area showers with a weak trough here along the eastern North Gulf Coast into the northern Panhandle with more isolated and widely scattered showers down to the south. And a chance of rain continues southern Kodiak Island with this very weak system here. Higher pressure, light winds out to the west, and then the winds pick up a little bit with more rain for the western Aleutians. And for tomorrow, that front brings rainy conditions far east of Amchitka Island back to Shimianatu, but high pressure keeps it pretty good for the Adak-Atka area and into the eastern Aleutians with possible sun breaks. Rain here with this front pushing eastward with gusty west and southwest winds, or mostly southwest winds. Those rains spilling across the north slope areas and along the Arctic coast. Fair here over the central and southern part of the state, with some scattered and isolated thunderstorm activity here from the Koyukuk Valley into mountains north of Fairbanks on over toward the Yukon, and partly sunny skies down over the Copper River Basin, maybe the Kenai Peninsula, but mostly dry conditions there. Still showers and cloudy skies for the southeast coast. And for the day on Wednesday, partly to mostly cloudy or partly sunny here across southern Alaska with an isolated shower or two. Some showers here over the eastern Alaska Range, northern Copper River Basin. Pretty good area of rain with this front now from the northern Bering Sea here, St. Lawrence Island, right into the central interior and toward the Tanana Valley, with rain pushing across the upper Yukon Valley, diminishing to showers behind the front there and drying out a little bit. And a couple of waves here bringing some moisture in, remnants of that front that's here, kind of breaks apart, but still the leftover moisture brings some rain into the central Aleutian areas. And a drier day for the southeast coast here with some possible sunshine, also a risk of a shower up to the north. And for the coastal water forecast, west winds 20 knots on the south coast, possible gusts at 35 knots. Central coast, west 20 to 25 knots, and west winds 15 knots for the north coast. West at 15 for Clarence Strait, south at 10 Stevens Passage, and Lynn Canal, south winds at 15 knots. And for the day Wednesday, for Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots, southwest at 15 here for Stevens Passage, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. Along the south coast here, northwest winds at 15 knots, and west winds 15 knots for the central coast. And the north coast, winds out of the west at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, southwest winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Variable winds here for the North Gulf Coast, 10 to 15 knots. Same thing for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, variable at 10. Cook Inlet, southwest 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And for Wednesday, for Cook Inlet, south to southwest winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Light variable winds here continue. Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, and the North Gulf Coast, as well as Prince William Sound, all looking at about 10 knots, and seas running 2 to 4 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, variable to northeast winds, 10 to 15 knots. The Alaska Peninsula, variable to north winds at 10 to 15 knots. And Bristol Bay, light east winds at 10 knots. Outlook for Wednesday, variable winds, 10 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. West at 10 for Bristol Bay, and variable winds, 10 to 15 knots. Kodiak Island. Eastern Aleutians, northwest at 15 tomorrow, Adak and Atka, south to southwest at 20 knots. And then small craft advisories here west of Adak out to Shimia for south winds at 30 knots with seas 9 to 13 feet. And then for Wednesday, small craft advisories continue out over the western Aleutians, south winds 25 to 30 knots with 9 to 12 foot seas. Adak and Atka south at 20 5 to 9 foot seas there. Eastern Aleutians, variable to southwest winds at 10 to 15 knots. Southwest coast, southwest winds at 15, south of Nunivak Island, Yukon Delta coast south at 20. And small craft advisories, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound for 25 knot winds. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island for south winds at 25 knots. Winds light and variable for the Pribilofs on Tuesday. And then for Wednesday, those will become southwest at 20 knots there for St. Paul and St. George. Small craft advisories here for the northern Bering Sea, the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, and Norton Sound for south winds 25 knots to southwest at 30 in the Sound, south 20 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east winds 20 knots, southeast at 20 on the central coast. Small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast, south winds 25 knots. And also small craft advisories for the Chukchi Sea, south winds 25 to 30 knots. And for the day on Wednesday for the Chukchi Sea, south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. 25 knot winds on the western Arctic coast, turn west at 25 for the central coast. And west-southwest 25 knot winds in the forecast for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast.